Crushing Iron podcast. Boy, it got cold again where I'm at.
Dude, it did here too, man. It was like, let's see, Monday was 80, and we sent Hayden to school in a t-shirt and shorts, but we packed a rain jacket, and then he rode home in the pouring rain with his rain jacket on and came in. He was like, I'm freezing. And then this morning I went for a run. It was 40 degree swing. It is, it was a nice weekend. It was a little bit windy here, but late fall, it looks like early winter is on its way, and you're on your way, and we're here. It's episode 628. Again, this is the Crushing Iron podcast. Today is October 25th, 2022. We appreciate you tuning in today. But yeah, it gets cold and brisk here, but the thing is it's a little bit dreary, and that's right. Where I kind of like cut the cord. Like I could actually like it when it's a little bit cold, but it's sunny. I could do without because I'm looking outside right now at the office and I see like already 3 trees, because it was like insanely wind, like 35 mile an hour winds on Sunday. So all the leaves that were like already kind of dead and hanging on like by dear life just went everywhere. So I'm looking at 2 trees empty, no leaves. It's basically still like the end of October. Like we don't have November yet. In the sky, there's no sunshine to be found. Except in your voice. That's the only place we can find it today. But yeah, it's gross, but hey, 'tis the season for that. We will persevere. We will get through. It's your first time tuning in. Welcome. We appreciate you giving us your time. We know you have quite a lot of options in the triathlon podcast universe and just podcasts in general, and that your time is very valuable. So we appreciate you tuning in today. We cover it all. We do swim, bike, and run specific podcasts. We do race recaps and also race previews. But for the most part, Mike and I, as coaches, athletes, best friends, we just sit back, relax, have an open, honest discussion about what we're going through, not just as human beings, but also as coaches and athletes ourselves. We also talk a lot about what our own athletes are going through. Mike and I work with a wide range of athletes all across the globe, from beginner level athletes looking at their very first 5K or sprint, all the way up through elite level amateurs trying to get back to Kona, and everyone in between, and from all over the globe. And we use the feedback loop we have with them in training peaks, emails, text messages, phone calls, and the like to drive the discussion of the day. We also frequently utilize our Facebook group. You can search that on Facebook again, Crushing Iron Group. Answer one simple question, let you right in. We got about 6,000 members in there now, which is kind of crazy to think about. But it's a great community, and it really is a fantastic resource. There's a lot of resources and ways to, consume information these days on all kind of media platforms. But it really is a solid community of people with no agenda. No one's pushing, sponsorships or plugs down your throat. It's just life experiences. And that's really the best, the most authentic, real kind of advice you can get, not just to make you a better athlete, but hopefully help you avoid pitfalls, and also just avoid the time that it takes to look up, how to not suck at swimming, and then you got 14 billion things that come up, including 6 of our podcasts. But yeah, it's a lot, but it's a great group. And sometimes we'll go in there like we did last week, do a little bit of the Q&A, answer as many questions as we can. But that's it. We don't do sponsors. We don't do ads, but we do have an agenda. And that's to keep you happy and healthy in your endurance sports journey.
Yeah. And you mentioned the wind. It must have come in from Ironman California.
Dude,
boy, that looked like I checked the first split on the bike and everybody was doing like 22 miles an hour. I'm like, what's going on here? And that changed pretty quickly.
It changed quick. We'll get into that here in a minute, because it's, as always, I mean, I know we've probably mentioned this on like 5 podcasts just in the last 6 months, that you look on paper and you think, I'm gonna fly.
Yep.
Downstream swim, pretty flat, pretty straight shot out and back bike, flat run, great weather, late season. You're thinking, dude, I am gonna absolutely destroy this. And then Mother Nature, pulls her hand out of her pocket with her fist closed and slowly raises her middle finger up at you and says, not today. And that's what happened. We'll talk about that in a minute. But before we get started on that, next week we are launching our C26 race specific training plans and packages. We haven't done that before. But we figured we've had a lot of requests in the past to just provide race-specific plans, given the fact that not everyone can afford one-on-one coaching. And let's be honest, not everybody wants one-on-one coaching. So we're doing that this year, and we're offering 20-week plans for all 70.3s and all Ironman races. We'll have them listed, though, as Ironman Texas, Chattanooga, and Wisconsin, and also 70.3s, Chattanooga, Des Moines, and Wisconsin. But I took the time to go through the Ironman website. And not all 70.3s and not Ironman. So I did just go through the Ironman website, and I picked all the races that we kind of didn't label and title them. And then I put kind of the corresponding training plan with those. You can know, like, if you're not doing Texas, you're doing Florida, obviously those match, and so on and so forth, like Wisconsin, or of course like Lake Placid would match up, or Mont Tremblant. So we had that on there because we already had a bunch of questions for that, and that's for November 1st. Again, it's not just a 20-week pre-race plan delivered through Training Peaks, but you also get an 8-week prep plan that I just finished this morning to kind of get you ready to rock and roll January 1st. And it's got a lot of opportunities, which is what I think makes it a really great value at $499. Is you get the 8-week prep plan, you got 20+ week pre-built race specific plan, and then I think honestly the two biggest things for it is you get access to our online hub, which has got 100+ tutorial type videos, and then you got hours of Zoom calls that we've done as a team that's got more information than you can unpack over the course of a year. So all that at your disposal. And you've also got we'll do an event group Facebook page to create a more sense of community. And then the big one, I think, is a monthly group Zoom call. So you'd be on a Zoom call with me, answering questions, going over things. So not just is it going to be like a really great training plan to get you ready for your best race of the year, but a great learning experience. You don't have to look online or make guesses. I'll be there walking things through, answering questions, kind of giving you the overview. Obviously, we want you to trust a plan based on our philosophy and how we do things, but it's always good to kind of hear the why behind what you're doing. So we'll do that. But again, that launches November 1st, and you can find more information on that on our website, c26triathlon.com. It's on the homepage, and then we'll have more information as that launches on November 1st.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's looking really good.
And now back to our program.
Back to the program. Yeah, we had a lot of people race in California, and I was actually watching some of the finish line stuff at the end, and it was interesting. It's a pretty big race, man. Considering, some of the races lately, it seems like it was pretty good numbers. I think it was 2,600 or something like that, which, and I'm watching it, and I think it was Mike Riley's last hurrah. And I think he said something like there was representation from 36 countries or something like that. And it was kind of funny because, you could, the names and stuff, he was having trouble with a lot of the names. I could tell. And, but it was pretty cool because you knew he was kind of fired up, but like the last race of his, and you could kind of hear the mic every once in a while. People come by and be like, "Hey, Mike, thanks a lot." And, it was when he wasn't talking and stuff. So that was pretty cool. But I did notice I think they had a couple things. Like one was the timing chip coming off the bike. I think they pulled a few people that maybe made the cutoff and they didn't think they did. And then one other thing that I don't know if anyone else saw this, but Riley was on there and he said, yeah, you may see a few athletes running back out the red carpet, and because I guess there was some kind of confusing last mile or something like that, and some people didn't hit the final timing mat. And they cut it or something, not on purpose necessarily, but I think it just wasn't planned out well. And you mentioned something about the volunteers, what I think is a pretty key point here in the whole thing. But anyway, it was kind of weird to see people finish, and then they would go back out, run back the other way on the red carpet. It was just like, they're going out. Can you imagine that, finishing and then saying, no, you've got, 3/4 of a mile left to go, take off the table.
There's a lot, honestly, to unpack about Ironman California. The past 10 years, there was an Ironman California in the past. Oceanside used to be they had Ironman Santa Rosa, and that went away. And you got a huge contingent of athletes on the West Coast, and all they do is want, a full distance race, and then they bring them and they remove them. And so, they announced Ironman California in Sacramento with, a big to do, a much to do about it, and to be honest, it should have been, there's the West Coast is a hotbed for triathlon, and And so they had it scheduled for last year to be the very first year. And I if you don't follow the sport or weren't signed up for it, there was a bomb cyclone race morning.
Yeah.
and they canceled it race morning, like not the night before, not 2 days before, but race morning. And that was supposed to be, looking back on it, like not only a huge missed opportunity for age groupers to, spend the money, but it was going to be Lionel Sanders versus Gustav Iden versus Jan Frodeno. Wow. Which is that's the battle that everyone wanted to see. And they were all race morning, and you saw a video of Jan being like, fuck, he was just pissed because he was ready to rumble. So it got canceled. And so, and then you had we have I think maybe 7 or 8 athletes, if not more, do it this year. I had a bunch of questions, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, and as a coach, you can, generally speaking, you can kind of give good answers about not just a course, but a race itself, but really it's about how it's run and what to expect. And listen, it didn't happen. This is a first year race. And I'm always a little suspect about first year races because it's a huge production to put on a race. And when you put it in a brand new city, listen, it's not like throwing an Ironman. Let's say Wisconsin, you got Wisconsin, the full, and then they're like, we'll add on Wisconsin 70.3. No big deal, right? You're already producing a great event. You've already done it for 20 years. Adding on a different event, no biggie, right? But this is the first time, not just for the venue, but for the state, and then for the people that were doing it. And I think it showed. And I did this kind of going back to when I was talking about for the race specific plans. I was going to the Ironman website and picking out Ironman races. Most of them I did North America. Obviously we have athletes all over, but for the sake of time, I just did North American Ironman races. And I looked at the list of North American Ironman races compared to the list of North American 70.3 races. Mm-hmm. And it tells you all you need to know about where the sport's going. 70.3, 70.3, 70.3, 70.3. It's got to be 5-1, if not 6-1. It is the distance, the most popular distance right now, and for good reason. I mean, I think they just canned Ironman Waco, which was a flop. And they're going to keep Waco 70.3. It's again, Ironman's about making money, and putting on a full is a lot of money. Putting a half, they're done at 2:00. Bye, see you later. Which is also the reason it's the most popular distance. And we said this 2 months ago. I said if you're wanting to do a full next year, don't sign up. Don't sign up. Sign up for 70.3, maybe April, May, June, July, and then if you want to do one, see if it fits your life and then pull the trigger. But most of them, you don't have to sign up, right? You don't have to wait. Then you get caught in the deferral program. We had an athlete, it was 3 years in the making. He signed up for Ironman Arizona in 2019. That I started working with one of his first full, deferred it to 2020, right? Canceled. And he got to change it to California in 21, canceled race morning. So finally, 3 years later, after we started working together, he finally got to do his full. And, and I heard a lot, again, as we kind of talked about in the open, you look at the course and you think, I'm going to PR by an hour. Mm-hmm. No problemo. But as always, there is no such thing as an easy race. And I looked at the temp race morning, it was 39 to start. And that didn't include the wind chill. So again, you're downriver stream, but the equalizer was the transitions. The transitions were insanely long. And from what I've heard both on the ground from our athletes, but also spectators, it seems very unnecessary. It was a mile run for both. And the biggest thing, and the win on the bike obviously made things really, 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 really hard and challenging. But my big thing is volunteers. Mm-hmm. My big thing about Ironman is volunteers, and anybody that volunteers their time for a race, you got to give them respect, and you got to be happy that they're there. But the kicker now, and because you keep hearing this, and ever since 2020 when they canceled races, volunteer participation has dropped significantly. And what you're seeing now, you saw it in Ironman St. George. You had volunteers taking chips off of people that didn't need to be their chips taken off. And you had the same thing happen with the run course. And then you heard the same. This isn't volunteer, but the swim buoys got moved to California. If you look at the beginning times for the end, as the race went on with the current, the buoys got moved and made it longer and harder. So the longer you waited in line, right, for the safety of the sport with the wave and rolling starts, it was harder and longer, right? They were having to like pull people upstream in boats and jet skis because you couldn't make the turn. But let's keep on with the rave starts, and like it's a totally different race. Same thing with, getting out early with the tailwind, having more of a headwind, and vice versa. But the thing with volunteers is it's free labor. Okay. Yeah. It's free labor. And you know what you get with free labor? You get a lot of people that don't give a fuck. You get a lot of people who really don't care that much. Like they care enough to be there, but most of them they don't know anything about triathlon. They're like the local Cub Scout group or the local youth group or you go to sign up at races, and it's the senior citizen field trip of the week, and like they don't pay anybody. The Ironman donates to the community, which is a tax write-off, but they need like a volunteer coordinator that's not just like this, that gets people that and pay them. And what they used to do, which I thought which they kind of lost their upper hand in this. I know this is probably not interesting to anybody, but what used to happen is in order to get into a race, you had to volunteer. Mm-hmm. Ironman Florida. I knew when I lived in Nashville, I had friends that drove down to volunteer at Ironman Florida because in order to volunteer, you got early registration before it went online.
Right.
And if you wanted to get into Ironman Florida back in the day, it'd be a sure thing. You had to go there, volunteer, and then stand in person. Again, in-person registrations. That doesn't happen anymore. Right. And sign up. And that's gone, right? Because they created too many races. The demand wasn't there. Now it's like, I can just wait forever. I can just sign up online whenever I feel like it. And not only can I do that, but now I can defer, which I think is a great thing, but also not very good. But yeah, the volunteer thing and making sure that they know what they're doing, they're there on their own time, right? They're taking time of their day to volunteer. I think that's wonderful. But educating them and giving them the right resources and the right, professional guidance to know whether you're ruining someone's day or not by taking a chip early, by pointing them the wrong direction, right? You hear that too. Like they did 6 extra miles on the bike, you got it's happening more and more and more and more and more. And so I think condensing things and approaching things in a more professional manner from a volunteer standpoint, just pay people a little bit of money. It's not like they don't rake it in, from a race that had 4,000 registrants for California, 4,000 people. And a lot of it, obviously, one of the biggest things, a lot of it was deferred. But I mean, you take 4,000 people and you multiply it by, even a lower 750 entry fee. That's $3 million. $3 million from entry fee. And you know how many people probably showed up to the race? 2,800, 3,000. Like they're banking. You could take 100 athletes, right, that pay $750, and these are athletes who don't even start. $750 times, let's say, you take 150 athletes. That's 112 grand that you could easily mobilize and hire, a group of people to really to pay them to make sure they're invested on race days. Anyway, that's a kind of a rant on volunteer, which I'm sure no one cares about, but you should. Because it affects your experience. And that's when people get upset. It affects your experience. And if it affects your experience, it affects the business. And it affects the business and it affects the bottom line. And that's when you start to see, people not want to do it. And you're seeing it happen more and more.
Yeah. And I actually am interested in this because I think it has something to do with the novelty of what's going on. And so, how they're adding races and then, they'll be there 1 year and then they move away. I just don't think you can get any continuity with the volunteers. I mean, even Wisconsin, which has been there 20 years, they were talking about struggling to get volunteers. And I think maybe that's possibly because they added a 70.3 in the same weekend. And then all of a sudden you got to tap all these volunteer people twice almost. My dad used to run a single A baseball team here in town. And when they started, it was kind of a real tight profit margin at back in the day. So his concession people were all volunteers, and how he did it though was they were technically volunteers, but they would hire like the local Kiwanis club to work the beer or the beer vending machine or whatever, and they would work the booth, and they would just he would give them $150 or whatever. He'd donate $150 to the whole cause,
Mm-hmm.
whether it was Girl Scouts or whatever, whoever was like in the group, So I think that's like a really good possibility. You got the local swim team and they're working T2 or whatever, and you give them, $3,000 or something like that, rather than trying to pay people on the clock. That would get all messy. But, maybe they do stuff like that. I don't know. But the question to me is, they're moving these races around, and I just think that takes a little time to kind of build, with the community and everything else like that. I mean, I'm sure there's people out in Sacramento going, what in the fuck is going on today? What is, like they have no idea,
Mm-hmm.
and they have no connection to it whatsoever. And, I just always kind of go back to Louisville, but that we know that was kind of a city didn't want it thing or whatever after a while, but they moved it out of the summer when they had, I don't know, they used to get, even when it was in the heat, they would get on bad registrations, they'd get like 22 or 2,500 or something, I felt like. And then like, well, let's move it into and then all of a sudden they're getting less people. And now the volunteers who are used to being in that rhythm of coming out there and doing what they do every summer, remember, it's the Ironman week. Oh, great. This will be a blast. And then now we're going to do it in October. Well, they got probably other shit going on or whatever. And I don't know. I think the fluidity of all these adding races just to make a quick buck, or I don't know if that's what it is. Probably. Let's try it out and then we'll pull out of there if it doesn't work. Well, I think they in some level they have to make a commitment, to actually try and make it work in a city, rather than this ain't gonna work, just because we had a few faux pas. It's like, I'm watching that race and they, even like the timing was all jacked up, and I heard that was kind of a funny thing. Like, everybody wants to go to a race. They all want to hear Mike Riley call their name and everything like that, and be an Ironman. I heard him. I could hear him on the off mic going, "Who is this? I can't. It's not popping up. It's not popping." And and he goes, "Number 2135. You are an Ironman." I just started cracking up, man.
Way to wing it.
Yeah. But it was, can you imagine you going through all that and then he just calls your number? It's like, you don't even know what your number is probably half the time.
Exactly. At that point, you're like, what? You probably know what your name is. I'm not one of those guys that got super excited with Mike Riley coming in. I know, but some people, like, they only go to races where he's there. But it's what happened was, I think a lot of it's Ironman's fault because they oversaturated. And again, you can't forecast what's going to happen. But there was a huge boom in triathlon. Then there was a little bit of a dip, and now you're seeing numbers go back up again. And what they did was they put too many fulls, and then honestly they lost some of the best ones. I mean, they did. Like, there used to be. I mean, I can go back and think of like so many, and I've been on the sport for a long time. There used to be a 70.3. 45 minutes up the road from where I live right now. Lawrence, 70.3, but it was too hard and too hot, so nobody did it. And so they canceled it. St. Croix used to be like the 70.3 back in the day. Canceled it, right? 70.3s are, in my opinion, are the best route. A route we said Rev 3 should have gone 7 years ago. Stop trying to compete with Ironman, being an Olympic distance and 70.3 juggernaut, but they tried to do full distance Ironman. It didn't work out very well. But 70.3s are the jam, and so I think things have to change. I don't know if they will or not. As you see, just in the last 3 weeks, they've announced 2 additional 70.3s up in the New England area. And so they see that there's a need. Right, because people are traveling. I do think they need to condense. In my opinion, always have one less race than you think you need, because demand is the almighty pressure driver for athletes. If they're afraid that they're not going to get in, even if they're not sure they're going to race, they're signing up. They're signing up. They'll have a year of FOMO if they don't. They're like, I got to sign up. I'm going to miss out. And then like, we can defer. Honestly, I think the defer policy is great for athletes. I think it's a terrible business model, but you're giving people so many ways to do 2 things. One, to not sign up on time, and then to just not train at all and lose it. Or how about like putting a little pressure on them that they do need to train? Yeah, to do it. They can, and the same thing goes for what they've done is they've created like the reverse of investment. Like, and same things for volunteers. You pay people to do something, they're going to be more engaged. And when you're more engaged, you're more invested. When you're more invested, you really figure things out and you become more passionate about things. I'm not talking about being a passionate volunteer and that's your profession. But I'm saying you're more likely to figure out if you like something or not. I'm talking about the sport, right? Like if I had this conversation with Hayden the other day, he's been playing hockey a lot. He moved up to this next group and he wants to like move up to a U8 and one of the parents like, I just let him try it out. My biggest thing is like, dude, I said, and we got like a bunch of like hockey stuff for him in the basement now. And I just told him, I said, listen, I will practice with you whenever you want to practice, but I'm not asking you to practice, because if you want to if you want to be great at something, you've got to love it. And in order to love it, you have to have fun doing it. So if you have fun doing it, we'll do it. But if you don't want to do it, we're not. And because that's how you love something, right? You love it, so you do it, and you that's all you think about. All you want to do is play it, not because you have to, but because you enjoy it and you love it. And then if you love it, you want to do it more. And that's when you become really, really good. And I told him, I said, I don't care what sport you play. Don't care. But you're playing a sport because I think it's good for every kid. And just find something that you love, something that you really love for whatever reason, because if you love it, you'll be good at it. And, he's never going to go pro, and the chance that like, 0.0000, especially if he has my genes, is negative 20, but just love it. But that's what has to happen is like, you can't ask people to kind of do something and stand around and give them a free t-shirt and some latex gloves and give them, shitty directions and expect them to love what they're doing. You can't love what you're doing and be invested in it if you don't feel empowered. Same thing goes with athletes. Same thing goes with races. Like we've gotten a little bit too soft on the investment, right? Mm-hmm. To be great at something, you got to invest. You have to invest with purpose. Same thing goes with, financials. You can't just kind of like, wake up every day and take a little bit of money, but like, all right, look in the stock market bottom line, you're like, and just shooting darts, like boom, 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 and do it randomly and expect to get a great return. You're just throwing darts. Every once in a while, you might hit one on the head and go big, but then you're going to lose it because your other 50 are going to be wrong. Investing is a huge thing, and we've given everybody a pass the last 3 years, right? You just defer it or roll it over. You don't have to. And it's like, while I think that was needed for everybody to kind of get their bearings and figure things out, that ship has sailed. Like I walk into businesses and I see, excuses or, please bear with us. I'm like, listen, I get things aren't easy, but we've had plenty of time to figure this shit out. We just have. Mm-hmm. We've had enough time to figure out what we need to figure out. So we can't keep using that excuse. So it's unprecedented times. Like, how long are we going to keep saying that? Like for businesses and like, what to expect. Like we should expect more. And we've gotten lulled into expecting less, and that being like the now standard of like of everything, right? Out of people and out of businesses and out of, customer service is gone, because now it's like, oh, well, if you show up to work, then, we saw a sign going out the other night that was like, please bear with, our staff. Just be thankful that they like, appreciate the ones that showed up. And I'm like, wait a minute. Yeah. Like, wait just 1 second. Like that's, I don't know what kind of messaging that's supposed to be. And while, I worked in the customer service and hospitality industry for a long time, if you're showing up to work, you work. You don't get a pass because you clocked in. The same thing goes to everything else. The same thing goes with training and racing. Like, we shouldn't be giving each other passes as much as we do. And again, it goes just to expecting a certain level of expectation. Again, not from a time standpoint, not from a result standpoint, but just flat out effort, right? Effort and investment is how you get the best and squeeze the best out of something. Not, again, going back to the volunteer thing. Hey, thanks, dude. Here's a shirt. Here's some latex gloves. And you give people water when they need it. Like there's just so much we could do. And if I'm Ironman, I'm thinking, all right, I need to maybe remove another Ironman, and I'd rather, if I'm Ironman, I'd rather have 5 races that sell out at 3,000, and you get, what is it, 5 races at 3,000, you got 15,000. I'd rather have 15,000 people sign up and all the races sell out, because now it's a huge demand. Then I would have 7 races that sell out at 25, quote unquote, right? Sell out at 2,500. No, like you want demand, because what it does, it makes people again invested in everything that they're doing, right? In their time, in their money, in their training. you know, and like, I never thought I could say this, what I said at the beginning of the podcast, which is, you know, our job isn't to, you know, give business guidance to Ironman because they wouldn't take it anyway. Our job is to guide our listeners and our athletes to the best way possible. And given the opportunities that they have, and the opportunity is to, if you want to sign up for a full, don't sign up. You know, it's like, wait. And to me, it's crazy that is, the brand is Ironman, but the distance is the least popular. And it's going to 70.3s. And I think that says a lot. And I think it's great in a way because it is super popular and it's a very attainable, right? For the longevity of the sport, it's a very attainable, you know, a weekly hour average to keep up with and have a family and kids and other hobbies to do instead of surrounding your life around Ironman. So while I think it's good for athletes in a way from, you know, the accessibility, I think it does continue to lower the bar of follow through. And I think that's a huge deal on both ends from the athlete standpoint, but also the business side of things for Ironman.
Well, I mean, you said something about Ironman, you know, they're not going to contact us about business information. And I kind of think that's a problem, man. I think that, you know, you're talking about investing in, you know, volunteers and stuff like that. I do think that that's probably a great place for them to start, you know, whether it's just putting more people on their staff to, you know, kind of coordinate it and make sure it's running right and everything like that. Because, I mean, I've been going to these races for the last 10 years or whatever, and I can tell that even the people that work for Ironman, I feel like they're getting cut back because they're always like, they're always kind of a little frazzled, but now it seems like, you know, it just doesn't feel like the same is from a friendly perspective or whatever. But the reason I bring up us is that I don't know about you, man, but we've been kind of up there in that Tri Club ranking on a lot of these races lately. And we do podcasts every, you know, 2 a week and everything like that. And I think we, you know, whether it's us or these other podcasts involved in the sport or whatever, or just tri groups in general, I mean, I think they're onto something there, but they're not, I haven't really gotten any like, hey, thanks for bringing 40 people to our race last week or whatever, you know, like that kind of stuff. I don't understand it, why they would not be like trying to connect the dots a little bit more, you know, because Ironman, I don't know, maybe Ironman isn't interested in doing Ironmans anymore. You know, maybe they like the 70.3 model, but you know what that reminds me of a little bit? It's like when, you know, remember growing up, like a Mercedes Benz or something like that was like that was the creme de la creme, or BMW or whatever. And now they've got like all those car companies are making, you know, low end models, you know, BMW for $25,000, you know, like that. And it's just kind of like milking, you know, or, you know, trying to get every ounce out of it, you know, it's like milking it till the end any way you can, but it's really kind of distracting from the brand, like in my opinion. I just think that if they're going to, you know, Ironman was built on Ironmans, and now all of a sudden, you know, like you're saying, the 70.3 thing's popping up. They're probably like, well, this is easy. You know, it's probably turnkey. You know, we don't have to put as much energy in it. We don't really, you know, if there's not as many volunteers, who cares? It's just a short race and they don't need them or whatever. But to me, it's like, let's get back to the basics here and really get to the athletes and the clubs and the groups and the people that actually drive the sport, because I think, you know, Ironman is always going to be an amazing accomplishment. And I think that people in society now always are leaning towards wanting to do, they're seeing their friends do things, and I want to do that. You know, it's always like the big decision to do an Ironman for somebody. And it's a big event in their life, you know, especially if it's their first and they're training for it. And I think that to me is always the secret sauce. It's not doing a 70.3. Even though, you know, that's a big deal. I'm not saying it's not for most people, but to have that, you know, pinnacle up there, it's like, I want to do an Ironman. And it's almost like they're kind of just letting that go a little bit on some level to me. I don't know.
You got to take negative feedback. I mean, that's just the thing. Like there was, this has been like maybe 4 months ago, but somebody from Ironman reached out and wanted to know if I wanted to be on like an advisory board for an app that they're doing. But one of the things on there was you can't say anything negative about Ironman.
What?
And I was like, I mean, I'd love to help you produce this new. They're working on an app and for athletes, and I was like, yeah, I'd be super interested in helping do that, be on the advisory board. And they were going to pay like 1099. I was like, sure, I'd love to help do that. And then it was like, she said, you do a podcast? And I said, yeah. And they said, well, do you say anything negative about Ironman on those? And I was like,
all the time.
Maybe. Of course, like, I was like, yes, because no business is perfect. No business. So obviously I was like, I mean, one of the main reasons we don't do sponsors and ads is because we don't want to, blow smoke up anybody's ass. And, we just want to kind of tell you what we think, even though we're not experts. At least we know what we're saying is, coming with no agenda. They got to take negative feedback and criticism better. And Messick is part of the problem. He is about as tone deaf as you can imagine when it comes to, he should be banned from speaking publicly on their behalf. And again, like when we talk like this will offend a lot of people because, they think Ironman does no wrong, and it's like every business does things wrong. I mean, like that's just part of it. But the point is to sift through the feedback and figure out what's reasonable and what's not. If we went back and looked at all the 1-star, which is, it's, the review system is interesting anyway, because, we can put out 620, 8 podcasts and a new person can listen to the first 30 minutes of one podcast and be like, this is the worst podcast ever. Mm-hmm. 30 minutes that they didn't like out of 650 hours, right? So they'll give it 1 star. You can't read those. You got to read the ones that are constructive. You got to ask yourself, what can we do better as a podcast to be better for our listeners, right? And we're not trying to, make money from it. We're not doing sponsorship, but still we ask ourselves hard questions. Should we do this? Should we not do this? Same thing goes for coaching. No coach is perfect. Every coach can get better. Everyone. We all have things to work on. No one has the secret sauce. And if they have the secret sauce, they're lying. And that's just the thing with even with big businesses that, and I've referenced this article a few times, maybe in the first 100 podcasts we did, but I read this interesting article from Harvard Business Journal that said the most loyal customers come from bad customer experiences made right. Mm-hmm. And if they had like delivered something bad and the company was like, that's how you create loyalty. And that's how you create, people are loyal to your brand, or loyal to your business by, screwing things up and making them right. But the thing is you can't just be like, hey, we'll give you a free entry to, whatever race next year. You're not fixing the problem. You're just making them happy, right, for a minute. But the best thing you can do is to prevent that, trend that you want. What you want to do is see that trend get smaller, right? Oh, we messed up 300 athletes last year and we took their timing chip too early. Okay. Well, the next year it should be 200 and the next year it should be 150 and the next year it should be it shouldn't be growing. Right. And right now you continue to hear story after story after story of, I was told to go the wrong direction. I was told to go to the finish chute. I was told my race is done. I had to take off my, my timing chip. I was told I couldn't do this. I was told I couldn't. It's like, well, this can't be that hard. Right. It can't be that hard. And so they've got to continue to learn and adapt. But again, they have an enormous amount of power because they have zero competition. Mm-hmm. Zilch, zero, nada. Like they're not worried about anybody. If anything, they just pop up a random 70.3 on the same weekend within like a 200-mile radius and goodbye, mom and pop. Mm-hmm. There people are going to go do that because the brand, but at some point that loyalty runs dry, and at least for the certain distance, again, you don't see that much negative feedback for 70.3s because there's a lot less to go wrong, in my opinion. And it's the courses are a little bit, easier to create. You're not having so many out and backs. The run course is, maybe not as complicated, but there's a whole lot of, there's too much that can go wrong. And so it's one of those things that they've got to work harder at. And I hope that they're considering it. I mean, it's not the first time people have, complain about it, and I'll be interested to see what happens, if anything. If not, the athletes and coaches, we should expect better, and or basically, start working with athletes to call to be ready to do their own race and memorize every single aspect of every single thing, even on, first time courses.
Yeah. Well, you said it, man. They have no competition, but when we started this, really kind of our mantra was always, we wake up every day and maybe not consciously, but at least subconsciously think, what can we do better for our athletes today? And I think that would be a good model for them in a way. And I get, like you said, there's no competition. I worked in corporate America for a long time. And at some point, when you get a stronghold on things and there's not a ton of growth, you got to do things like, like they're doing with 70.3s or whatever. But you also, one of the ways to make profit in corporate world is by cutting expenses. And I went through it at my news business when I used to work back there, and they cut, we were doing fine. I mean, like ridiculous amounts of profit in the television business back in the day, like 50%, which was kind of unheard of, like they just print money at those things. And that's kind of what Ironman does. So it's like, well, we can't seem to get more people involved. So let's cut back on, our expenses somehow. And I don't know if that becomes, volunteer coordinators or just, staff or whatever in general. And plus they're spreading thin and, doing 5 races a weekend and things like that sometimes. And it's got to be complicated, and I think it's sort of like they have a system, they plop it in, and then, kind of goes a little haywire once in a while. So you deal with it. But I just don't know why, it just seems to me like, as a big behemoth in this sport, that they could just really kind of reach down a little bit more instead of, just making boardroom decisions all the time. And then here's what you guys got to deal with now. And it just, I don't know, man. I just feel like they could really do a lot more by, like I said, reaching out to, I know they do it a little bit, but like coming down to earth a little bit and saying, hey, we're committed to making Ironman like that big prize again. And I know it is, but you know what I'm saying? I just feel like the luster of it kind of goes away a little bit when they're moving things around. They don't create the same kind of excitement about it. And there's a lot of people too that have been in the sport for a long time, and it's how do you retain that, And I think the longer you're in something, the more you get jaded with it or whatever. But there's plenty of opportunities to create that spark again around things. But maybe Ironman, the distance, I've always thought it's got to be a real tricky thing to manage, especially going, like you're saying, you go into these towns and you got to get 85 police officers to guard the street corners. And I mean, there's a lot going on there, but and we talked about before, it's like, I don't mind, some of the courses seem to be going to 3 run loops and things like that. I don't have a problem with stuff like that, as long as it's even on the bike, but I guess that's it gets crowded or whatever. But I still think that there's ways to kind of condense the overall, footprint of the race and have it more, it might be better for spectating too. And that's the other thing is like, how do you make it more enjoyable for people to come out and support? And, I know that, it's just one of those things where, like when I started my first year, I had 15 or 20 friends come out and they were there most of the day or whatever. And now it's like, if I can get 3 out or 4, it's like a good thing, but how can you make that experience just better to be around? There's a lot of things that I think that when I always think about it, I always just think about what can you do on the ground to make this a better experience. I've been going to these races a long time, and you can just see that race mornings are just kind of not quite what they used to be,
There's, again, like, this is probably maybe like the least favorite podcast we've ever done, because it's about nothing about racing and training and people's 10 fastest, tips to go through transition. But like, to me, there's got to be a happy medium between how they schedule most races, and then how they advertise things like Clash, Daytona. I don't want to sit and watch people ride around a fucking track all day long. It's as boring as all get out. But I also don't want to watch, or spectate a race where you see people 4 times in 16 hours. There's got to be some kind of a happy medium. Again, I totally agree with you. If you look at and you can't do this because this the sheer volume of people. So it is a happy medium, right? Because you can't do what ITU races do, which is they're basically smack dab in the middle of a downtown. They do 12 loops on the bike for a 26-mile run. The swim is 2 loops for a 1,500 meters, and the run's 4 laps for a 10K. You can watch every single minute. But there's also only 50 athletes for men and 50 athletes for female, around about there. So it's only 100. Yeah, you can't do that, right? And condense them all into that small of a place. But it's so much more fun to watch than a long distance race on a speed track. There's nothing to be gained from that. But there's got to be something, right? And again, that's why I think 78.3 distance is a good way. And you're going to see continued loop courses if they can't get more volunteers. And while you're talking, it's some quick math. So let's say, and again, all they have to do, 2 ways to fix the problem. And again, no one wants to see prices raised, but there's an easy way Ironman can slide in raise their rates $25, and no one would blink. Listen, if you're paying $775, you're paying $800. Okay, you're paying it. If you're in, you're in. Layer in a $25 fee to every entry. And again, I don't think they should do this. I think they make enough money off the top end to be able to do this. They should do it. Make a little bit less to make more in the future. Again, a great lesson for business. Make a little bit less now, make more in the future, but better experiences and more loyalty and more sellouts. $25 extra for an entry fee times 3,000 is 75 grand. 75 grand divided by 500 volunteers. 500 volunteers. It's $150. You work a 10-hour shift, that's $15 an hour. That ain't a bad day, right? Especially if you love what you're doing. So do something like that to incentivize people, right? Or volunteer, and you don't get free entries. You don't get, first line to register for a race because that doesn't matter anymore. But do away with the whole AWA thing, because it's just about signing up for races and paying money. Instead, remove those AWA racks, which again, this is going to get me a bunch of 1-star reviews and hate mail. I mean, AWA is about it's about status of how many races you signed up, very rarely how well you did. And make those first best racks of the race for people that volunteered the year before. That's easy good. Fix. Guess how many people would volunteer the next year? You'd have too many, because everyone wants the best rack space, right? So you take the 300 best spots, and you basically, those are allocated randomly for the 300 people who registered. They're doing the race the next year. You get to register. Maybe that's the key. Let's say you want to do Ironman Wisconsin next year, right? Well, this year you had to volunteer at Ironman Wisconsin. And then you got to sign up, you get to get in line race morning and then sign up and pick your spot on the rack. You know how many people would want that number one leaving the parking deck? It's the shortest one, right? Everyone wants. So I think if you want athletes to care, you gotta give them a little something. And I think that's a great way to give them a little bit of something, right? Yeah. Without giving anything away. People want placement. So I think that's actually a pretty halfway decent idea.
No, that's a good idea. And I think it gets, for a guy like me, it would get me more invested too, if I volunteered or whatever. But I think you should just be able to maybe get a volunteer credit, if you do a local race, and then you can transfer that to Wisconsin. You volunteered at a race of ours, then that's good for a voucher somewhere else in a rack. I like that idea, but you don't need to. I mean, that's the thing, right? It's like back in the day, you don't need to travel 8 hours to go to Wisconsin to volunteer if you live, in tech or whatever. And if you live in Texas, and you don't have to drive 18 hours to volunteer up there if you want to do Wisconsin, but you can volunteer at Texas and get the rack voucher for Wisconsin or something like that. That is one of the greatest parts of a lot of great parts of what
the ultra running community could bring to long distance triathlon is when you look at some of like the most popular races, Western States, Leadville, Superior 100 in Minnesota, some of the Hard Rock 100, some of the hardest ones to get in. Not only is it lottery, but you're required to put in a certain amount of volunteer hours at another race or making new trails in your own community.
Mm-hmm.
There are also a lot of races where you can't even apply to be in the lottery for a 100 miler if you haven't completed a 50.
Oh, yeah.
To me, those are like genius ideas. Of course, like they've got like 300 people signing up for a race, not 4,000, right? But still, there are bits and pieces of that, especially the volunteer part, right? That I think maybe I just think there's a way, right, to engage that doesn't have to be about them paying more money and us paying more money. There's got to be a happy medium. Listen, Andrew Messick, if you're listening, Ironman, if you're listening, the volunteer thing to get a good placement in transition, or you get something in return, right? Something, because let's be honest, it's sad that it's come to that, right? You can't volunteer now for the sake of volunteering and loving and helping. You're like, yeah, I'll volunteer, but I gotta get something in return. Well, it's not really volunteering, because you're wanting, a quick pro quo, but it's like something creative can be done, right? For hours worked gets you, a sign up for this or a sign up for that, or you get to, be in the first swim wave with a 5-minute head start, not like but you get clear water, first wave of the race before the elites go off, before the race even starts. You can rolling start in the first wave, and but the last swimmer in the water, you get the rest. The wait is 5 minutes. Get clear sailing. Just stuff. I'm telling you, there's stuff like that you can do, and people would absolutely jump. I'd jump at it. I'm like, heck yeah, put me in the water with that. I'm like, heck yeah. Let me pick my transition spot. Heck yeah. Like there's stuff like that listen, be creative, and engage people. I think, again, they're never going to listen to this, but still, I don't know. Some of the people on staff there listen to our podcast, put this up the chain of command, and let's make this a better experience, not just because it'll be a better experience for Ironman. You think they want to get hate mail and, it floods their inbox about, volunteer at, and you know what else volunteers should have? Bibs. Volunteers should have bibs, right? It's like, when you get pulled over, and you don't like the cop, you're like, what's that badge number? 537 V9. I can't wait to call your chief as if they give a shit, but you got volunteers that aren't doing anything or being whatever. You're like, what are you, bib number, volunteer bib number 433? I got your number, right? So you get to give some, you got to give people expectations they got to meet. Like, listen, I'm telling you, there's stuff you can do.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot you can do. And you can't get people to work, let alone volunteer anymore these days, it seems like.
No, right?
So it's like,
we started out with asking people to work. Now we're asking people to volunteer.
Right, yeah. But what about, like I always look at that legacy program, and I'm, because I'm close on it. I would never use that personally, but there's got to be some kind of like if you do Chattanooga 70.3 and you do the full, you get a double medal at the end, or whatever. It's like, how about packaging these races together or something like that? If you sign up for both, you get X amount off or something like that. It'd be a great way to feed things too. It's like, hey, you're doing 70.3. If you want to do the full, we'll give you, 10% off or whatever. If you buy them both at once in a package.
Yes. Yeah. And the 70.3 in 2023, then the full distance 2024 plan. Lock them in for 2 years.
Yeah.
Lock them in. You know what they're doing? Now they're doing a 2-year journey where they're going to fall in love with the sport instead of being a one and doneer.
Mm-hmm.
Not crushing themselves for a full because they've got to do it this year and they don't know what's going to be around. Like, dude, come on, Ironman, come on, just drive it. I would say fly us in. Drive us into your Tampa office, on a bus, and we can sit down and talk through some things, and And let's tell you, we can help you out. We are the voice of the common man. We are no one special. We are not celebrities, but we're the voice of some of the common men and women, not all of them. But listen, we didn't plan on going this direction today, but we kind of did, and that's the greatness of not having to interrupt our podcast for a commercial about shoes we don't believe in, nutrition we don't take, and mattresses we don't sleep on. So we can just kind of go with the flow, and hope you enjoyed something about today. And as always, go to our website, c26triathlon.com. It's a one-stop shop for all things coaching, camps, and community. If you're looking for more info on our race-specific plans for 2023, you can go there. If you're looking for a one-on-one, more personalized coaching, you can click on the coaching tab and peruse our roster of coaches. And then our Ironman Wisconsin and 70.3 Wisconsin camp goes live on November 1st. That will sell out, I think, within the first week or two. So be ready, hop on that. We'll link to that in the show notes next week. And as always, if you need anything from Mike, he's at CrushingIron@gmail.com. If you need anything from me specifically, I'm at C26coach@gmail.com.
All right, man. I actually enjoyed that. I think people care about the sport and what's going on. And we're always just trying to make it, more enjoyable, happy, healthy. That's what we do, right?
Yeah. I mean, at some point, what I want is to see like one of those 60-minute interviews with volunteer today on 60 Minutes, volunteer bib number 432, and they've got his his face blacked out and his voice like all messed up.
Spiked the punch.
We're gonna hear his side of the story for his run-in with age group in the 35-39, bib number 545, talking about their water bottle handoff at mile 80. Next on 60 Minutes. So one day it's going to be like that, man. I'm telling you. That's it. That's all I got. We'll see you Thursday. We love you and we appreciate you.
All right, buddy. See you.